Kimberly Clark. I'm the author of Stuck Between Pleasure and Pleasing God. I'm also a person in long-term recovery. It wasn't always like that though. I grew up in a loving family, a loving spiritual family. My mom kept us in church all the time, talking about Sundays and Wednesdays. And most of the time, she had 2 jobs. So no matter how tired she was, no matter what else she needed to do, no matter how much rest she needed to get, she made sure we was in church on Sundays. And so around my sophomore year, I lived in the country, by the way. Castor, Louisiana, real small town. Population maybe about 400 people, right? And so we moved to Shreveport, Louisiana, of my sophomore year of high school. And I was so nervous, but I needed that new start because I had been picked on a lot. And when I was in Castor, I'd been called ugly. And so I had really low self-esteem. And so when I got to Shreveport, I thought, man, these are new people. It's a new setting. So they gotta like me. Somebody gotta like me. It's too many people that, you know what I'm saying, they won't like me. So we got there. I started playing basketball. I started doing track and softball and, you know, trying to find my way. But then it was the same thing there. I started getting picked on, but I would never say anything back. I didn't have a voice back then. And so I started to hate myself. I started to hate myself a lot. And my senior year of high school, my mom got sick. At one point they told us that she had 2 weeks to live. She had really bad heart problems. And she needed a heart transplant. And so I went my whole senior year of high school, going back and forth to Houston, Texas, to St. Luke's, the best hospital in the country, I promise. They took such good care of my mother. And going back and forth to Houston, and I had to stop playing basketball, stop running track, but I stayed on the debate team. And so my mom, she got a heart transplant like maybe 6 months before my graduation. And she was my graduation present. Her presence at my graduation was my present. And so my goal, what I wanted to do, was go to ULM, the University of Louisiana Monroe. And for debate, I wanted to become a psychologist, major in psychology and minor in social work, right? But then I talked to this recruiter, and the recruiter, they're known for lying a lot. This Navy recruiter, and he told me how I could travel the world and be in school at the same time. And so I fell for it. I signed the papers, my mom signed the papers, and I was off to basic training after graduation. So my first duty station was in Guam, on board the USS Frank Cable, and I traveled to Russia, to Thailand, Guam, Hawaii, Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, Saipan. I went all over the Pacific. And then the unthinkable happened. I used to party a lot with friends. I used to drink a whole lot, you know. And one day I was at a party in the barracks, and a guy that was supposed to be my friend, he raped me. And so the next day I had flashes of what happened. I knew what happened. And it took me a few weeks to tell anybody. And so I told one of the guys who I consider my brother, and he went and confronted the guy in front of everybody, and it got back to my chain of command, and it was just this whole big thing. And so I had to talk to NCIS every day for about 4 months. They had me wear a wire to go talk to the guy. They had the phone tapped as I called him, trying to get him to confess. He never did. He knew what was up. And so I tried to commit suicide. I took a whole lot of pills, and one of my roommates that was in the barracks with me, she found me. I didn't want to live then, but I'm so thankful that death did not have authority back then, that I'm still alive. And I give God nothing but the glory for that. And so after trying to commit suicide, they put me off of ship duty. And then so my ship would go out on deployment, and I would have to stay back. And so I tried to commit suicide again. I just didn't know how to deal with it. I was so lost. I just didn't know how to handle myself. I didn't know who I was anymore. And so they eventually medevaced me back to the States, and I got a medical discharge from the Navy. After medical discharge, I came back to Louisiana. Where I started hanging out with my family members, and I was introduced to crack cocaine. Now, when my aunt introduced me to crack cocaine, it was as if she was introducing me to a person. They was in the kitchen smoking, and I'm like, what are y'all doing? She was like, oh, we smoking. I said, what is that? She said, oh, baby, this is crack cocaine. First time I tried it, I was completely hooked. I started going out on my own, looking for it, trying to get it. And I remember maybe 2 weeks later, my brother found out about it. He was living in Arkansas. He came down and he staged an intervention. He called maybe 5 other of my cousins, and they did an intervention that night. I went to rehab for the first time in Temple, Texas. I went down there, and I tell you, I got a male sponsor. He had about 20 years clean, and I didn't know that you weren't supposed to have a sponsor of the opposite sex. He did, of course, and he completely manipulated me, used me. Come to find out he was married, so I relapsed. I relapsed for about 2 years after that. I ended up coming back to Louisiana. I got clean for maybe a year, and I ended up getting married. I got married to a narcissist, extremely egotistical, overbearing, emotionally abusive, physically abusive. And so I stayed out in addiction. I found myself in and out of jail, in and out of CCC. I think the most I've done was, I believe, for 3 months. And they sent me down to St. Gabriel. Man, that in jail was the first time that I spoke in tongues. I remember this lady, Mother Stewart, she came in and I requested a one-on-one, and she called me up there, and I was sitting at the table, and she was like, listen, we can't touch each other, but the power of God is so strong, he gonna move through this pen, watch. And so she held one end of the pen, I held the other, and she started praying. She said, just open up your mouth, and start speaking. And that's what I did. And sure, lo and behold, I started speaking in tongues for the very first time was at CCC. So my jail experience was unforgettable. It was unforgettable. I met so many people who did not have support, who were lost, just as I was at that point, But I also took that opportunity as a time to make up my mind that I do not want to go back to that life. I want to live, and I want to have life more abundantly. Why? Because God promised me that, and I want all of God's promises. God told me that I was the apple of his eye, and I wanted to believe that. I wanted to walk in that. And so I would get out of jail, and then I would go back out, and I would relapse, of course. For a span of 10 years, I struggled with active addiction. This last time I went to jail in 2020. Let me tell you, me and my cellmate, we would get in there, we would pray. Literally, all throughout the day, we would pray. And let me tell you, prayer is the most powerful tool, because sometimes when we feel like it's not working or it's not going to do anything, I promise you, prayer is adding things to your life. It's calling things out so it can come into fruition. Prayer is the most powerful tool. So this last time I went to jail, I got out, I started doing the things I said I was going to do in jail. And so I went step by step. I started going back to church. I started getting involved in church. I started developing my own prayer life, and I started giving back to other people. I started, telling my story to other people. And believe it or not, us sharing our story and us giving hope to people who felt hopeless, that does so much, not only to them, but within us. And it was for me, And in my case, I ended up getting a divorce. Last year, it was final. And so now I have 18 months sober by the grace of God. I made 18 months sober July 3rd, 2022. And there was nothing but God who did that. I was not leaning on me. It's nothing I did. It was none of the work I put forth. It was nothing but God, because I asked him to. I asked him to, and I was desperate for him. I was desperate for his help. And I needed that. I wanted that so bad. And I know sometimes that we can want to be clean, we can want to get sober. And it just feels like, man, am I going to ever be able to stop this? It feels like we just can't. If you hold on just a little while longer, just hold on, he will answer your prayer. So now I am a published author. I wrote down everything that happens into my life because I wanted other people to have hope. I wanted other people to know that they can survive, that they can overcome, that it's not the end. Just because we were addicts and alcoholics, it's not the end. I work for the state of Louisiana now as a peer support specialist. I never thought in my life that with my background, I could do that. Listen, if you do nothing else, be honest with people, because you'll be surprised how many people are willing to work with you because of your honesty. And people want to help people who have started out on the wrong path. You know what I mean? Like, they really do want to help. Be honest. God will do the unthinkable. Things that you never thought that you could be, things you never thought that you could do because of the mistakes we made in our past. You can do it. God will provide a way, and he will provide the resources. He'll do that. He will lay out every step of the way. Order my steps. He will do just that. And just know that I love y'all. God loves y'all. And believe it or not, one day you're going to love yourself.
That's so good. Let me find my t-shirt. Every time.
Oh,
every person who does it, I'm just like, I'm humble.
Oh, God. I kind of lost it for a second. Was it okay?
That was awesome.
That was awesome? Okay.
Yeah, if there's any